Jiren, what are you doing in there? Elia called out, her voice laced with confusion as she stepped closer to the bathroom door. What she saw made her freeze. Her husband stood over the toilet bowl with a brown folder in his hand. Her folder, the one containing her original documents for her long-awaited job interview. Her heart skipped.
What the hell are you doing?
She shouted, rushing forward. But before she could reach him, he dropped the last set of papers into the toilet and slammed the handle. The water swirled violently, dragging her hopes with it, page by page. Elia stared at the bowl, watching 2 years of careful planning disappear into the pipes of the house she'd once believed was a home. And in that moment, something inside her, something that had been quietly cracking for years, finally broke all the way open. My name is Elia. I was 41 years old, and 3 years earlier I had walked away from a marketing director role I'd spent a decade building, because my husband Jiren convinced me it was best for the family if I stayed home while he focused on his career. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. Love makes you generous with your trust, sometimes to your own detriment. At first, staying home felt like a gift. I threw myself into our house, into raising the quiet, steady rhythm of our life together. But slowly, almost too slowly to notice, the control crept in. Jiren started reviewing my spending. He'd ask who I was texting. He'd get quiet, cold, really, whenever I mentioned an old coworker or a former ambition out loud. I told myself this was just what marriage looked like when one person carried the financial weight. I told myself a lot of things back then. The interview that ended in that bathroom was for a marketing consultancy role I'd applied to in secret, 3 months earlier, after a recruiter found my old resume online and reached out. I hadn't told Jiren at first. When I finally worked up the courage to tell him I'd made it to the final round, he smiled in a way that didn't reach his eyes and said, "That's cute, Elia." Really? Cute. I should have listened to that smile. What none of us knew that morning, not me, not Jiren, not even the version of myself I'd buried under 3 years of small compromises, is that watching those papers spin down the drain would become the exact moment I stopped asking for permission to have a future. For the rest of that day, I moved like a ghost in my own home. Each step heavier than the last. By Tuesday morning, the day of my final interview, I sat on the edge of the bed, dressed but empty. The call with Morgan and What Corporation had been short. "We require physical documents," the HR woman had said, politely but firmly. "We wish you all the best in your future endeavors." Jiren had whispered those same words back to me later that night, mocking them, like my humiliation was something to be savored. Then I stared out the window. The sun was shining bright and harsh, like a cruel joke. If you've ever had someone you trusted quietly work to keep you small, drop a heart in the comments. I promise you, this story is going to feel familiar in ways you didn't expect. Keep watching. But as I sat there in silence, a flicker of something else stirred. Determination. I pulled my laptop onto my lap and opened a forgotten folder titled Ideas. Inside were scattered business plans, unused budgets, and logo sketches I'd made years ago during slow weekends, back when I still let myself dream out loud. One caught my eye, Glow Nest. I had named it years ago, when I began mixing natural oils for my own hair in our tiny first apartment kitchen. At the time, Jiren had laughed. "Nobody's buying homemade goop," he'd said. But now I had nothing left to lose. I clicked open the document and smiled weakly. I opened another browser tab and searched for cosmetic suppliers. By evening, I'd contacted 5 vendors and placed a small order using money from an account Jiren didn't know existed, a secret savings I'd built, $5 and $10 at a time, skimmed from grocery budgets over 18 months, tucked away for a reason I hadn't let myself name until that night. I want to pause here and tell you something important, because I think a lot of you watching this will recognize it. I didn't have a plan to leave him yet. I didn't have a plan to prove anyone wrong. I just needed, desperately, to build one single thing that belonged entirely to me, something no one could flush down a toilet, mock in a hallway, or take credit for at dinner parties. That single decision, made alone on the edge of a bed with wet eyes and a laptop balanced on my knees, is the reason everything that came next was even possible. I want to rewind for a moment, because I need you to understand exactly how we got to that bathroom door, and how a marriage that once felt like partnership slowly became something closer to ownership. It started small, the way these things always do. Jiren would joke in front of friends about how I used to be somebody before I became just a mom. I don't have children. That particular cruelty was aimed purely at my identity, my choice to support his career, twisted into evidence of my own irrelevance. He controlled the calendar. He controlled the car. Eventually, without me fully noticing the transition, he controlled the story of who I was allowed to be. There was one dinner, about 8 months before the bathroom incident, where I mentioned, almost casually, that a former colleague had started her own consulting firm. Jiren's jaw tightened. Later that night, in our bathroom, the same bathroom, months before it became the scene of my breaking point, he told me, quietly, dangerously calm, I'm the man of this house. I have to stay in control. I stepped back, tears welling. You don't want a partner, Jiren, I said. You want a puppet. I want a wife who knows her place, he snapped. I stared at him in silence, already knowing something inside me had just changed forever. Jiren didn't say another word. I walked away, fists clenched, heart pounding. He remained in the bathroom, staring into the water like it had answers. That night, I locked myself in the guest bedroom. I didn't cry where he could hear me, but my pillow, soaked with silent tears, told the truth. The next morning, I didn't mention it. Neither did he. We simply resumed our roles, like actors returning to a script neither of us had agreed to write. I want to tell you what finally happened 4 months after that bathroom conversation, the interview, the toilet, and the decision that changed the entire direction of my life. But first, you need to understand just how far I let this go before I stopped it. Because I think some of you are living in that before right now, and I want you to see exactly what's on the other side of it. I started small with Glonest. A single hair oil blend, mixed in mason jars on the kitchen counter while Jiren was at work. I photographed the bottles using natural light from our bedroom window, the same window I'd stared out of on the morning of my ruined interview. I built a simple website late at night after he'd gone to sleep, learning e-commerce platforms from free tutorials, teaching myself things I'd once paid other people to do for me at my old marketing job. For the first 6 weeks, I sold exactly 11 bottles. Mostly to my sister, my old coworker Priya, and 2 strangers who found me through a small local Facebook group for natural hair care. 11 bottles felt like nothing and everything at the same time. Jiren noticed the boxes arriving. I told him I was just doing a little hobby thing, and watched him accept that explanation because it fit neatly into the version of me he needed to believe in, small, harmless, contained. That lie bought me time. I'm not proud of needing it, but I don't regret using it. Every evening after Jiren fell asleep, I sat at that same kitchen table with my laptop, building spreadsheets, researching packaging suppliers, teaching myself basic photography lighting through free YouTube videos. My eyes burned most nights. I ran on 4 hours of sleep for the better part of 3 months. But for the first time in years, the exhaustion felt like it belonged to me. By month 4, Glonest brought in enough revenue to cover its own supply costs and put a small profit in that same secret account. It wasn't much. But it was proof. Proof that the woman Jiren dismissed at that dinner table, the one he said was just cute for dreaming, could build something real with her bare hands and a stolen hour each night. Then, in month 5, everything nearly collapsed. Jiren found the account. He'd been going through our joint bank statements, something I later learned he'd been doing quietly for years, another layer of control I hadn't fully understood, and noticed a linked business account under my name. He confronted me on a Sunday evening, holding his phone up like evidence in a trial. "What is this, Elia? What have you been hiding from me?" I stood in our kitchen, surrounded by GlowNest inventory boxes I hadn't yet had time to hide, and I made a decision that terrified me more than anything I'd done in our entire 12-year marriage. I told him the truth. I told him about the account. About GlowNest. About the 11 bottles, then the 50, then the 200. I told him that I built it after he flushed my interview documents down that toilet, because I needed something that couldn't be destroyed by someone else's hands. His face went through something I can only describe as a slow-motion collapse, shock, then anger, then something quieter and harder to name. "You've been lying to me for months," he said. "You lied to me for years," I said back. "You just did it by making me believe I had nothing worth building." We didn't speak for 3 days after that. 3 days of silence in the same house, passing each other in hallways like strangers who happened to share a mortgage. On the 4th day, something shifted, not because Jiren suddenly understood what he'd done, but because a national wellness retailer emailed me, unprompted, asking to feature GlowNest in a curated small business spotlight after finding my product through the same Facebook group where I'd sold my very first bottles. That single email changed the trajectory of everything. Within 3 weeks, GlowNest orders increased by more than 400%. I hired my first part-time assistant, a college student named Marisol who believed in the brand before it had any right to be believed in. I upgraded from mason jars to Real manufacturing partners. I remember sitting at that same kitchen table, now covered in shipping labels instead of secrecy, and thinking, this is the moment he told me would never come. Jiren watched all of this happen from a careful distance, unsure how to reconcile the wife he thought he understood with the woman quietly building something bigger than either of us had imagined. 18 months after that morning in the bathroom, GlowNest crossed its first year of 6-figure revenue. I remember the exact afternoon I saw the number in my accounting software. I sat completely still for almost a full minute, unable to process that the homemade goop comment, the one meant to shrink me permanently, had become the joke instead of the prophecy. Jiren asked to talk that same week. He sat across from me at our kitchen table, the same table where I'd built this entire life in secret, and he said something I never expected to hear from him: "I was afraid of losing control of you. So I tried to control everything else instead." It wasn't a full apology. It wasn't enough, honestly, to undo what those months of isolation had cost me. But it was the first honest sentence he'd spoken to me in years. And for the first time, I let myself really look at him, not as the man who'd flushed my future down a drain, but as a person who had, in his own damaged way, been terrified of a version of me he couldn't fully own. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because I think it matters more than a clean, easy ending. Jiren and I didn't simply reconcile and live happily ever after. We went to therapy, real therapy, uncomfortable and slow. Some sessions I sat in silence, arms crossed, unwilling to give him the relief of my forgiveness too quickly. Other sessions, I cried in ways I hadn't let myself cry since that bathroom floor. Today, 3 years after that ruined interview, GlowNest employs 11 people, most of them women who, in one way or another, are rebuilding something for themselves too. Jiren works part-time in our warehouse now, a decision he made himself, quietly, without ceremony, restocking shelves for a business built entirely from the ashes of the thing he once tried to destroy. I won't tell you our marriage is perfect. I won't tell you every wound is closed cleanly. What I will tell you is this: the version of me who once needed permission to dream is gone, and she's not coming back, no matter what happens between Jiren and me from here. If you take one thing from this story, let it be this: sometimes the moment someone tries hardest to make you small is the exact moment you find the strength to become something they never saw coming. Thank you so much for watching this story all the way through. If it moved you even a little, it would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button and turned on notifications, because we share stories just like this one every single week, real, honest, and told with care. I'd genuinely love to know, have you ever rebuilt something for yourself after someone tried to take it away? Tell me in the comments below. I read and respond to as many as I can, and your story matters here.